and welcome to the Journey Through the Generations podcast. I'm Trisha.
And I'm Phillip. And I'm glad that we finally got on the mics for another podcast.
Yes.
It's been a minute, right?
It's been over a month.
And it wasn't intentional.
No, it wasn't.
We wanted to do one, but there was some traveling involved. And,
Correct. I had a birthday.
Yes. And so things have happened. So, but we're here and we are ready to get going on this episode. So today, what you're going to talk about today,
I'm going
Trisha?
to talk about today how newspapers have helped me in my research during this genealogy journey.
Which is funny because newspapers now aren't, as popular as they were back in the day. So
Right.
it's funny saying, I'm going to look at newspapers because you just don't see people looking at newspapers anymore.
Right,
So
no, newspapers.
That's weird.
I don't want to say they're obsolete, but most people get their information online. They don't actually get a newspaper. I think the only person that gets a newspaper still that I know is my brother.
Well, and there's reasons. There's reasons why he gets a newspaper, which he really doesn't need to. He can get the information he's looking for on the computer
But he
or on
says
his
that he
phone.
likes to actually hold the paper and read it.
And there's still a lot of people like that, so it's just not as popular anymore. But so I know that you're looking for information from a long time ago when newspapers were popular, but it's still funny today to hear. I looked at XYZ newspaper.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so talk about how you use newspapers and your research and the kind of things that you look for.
Okay, well, the first time I ever went and looked at newspapers was actually in the very beginning of my journey. I went to my local library in Newport, Arkansas, and I was specifically looking for newspaper obituaries for my grandparents. They all lived and died in Newport, and so I knew that there should be some kind of record of their death in our local newspaper. So I went to the library, and this was the first time that I had ever actually been to the library for genealogy research. At this point, I had been doing all of my research online on Ancestry. It was like the first time I ever did anything outside of my kitchen table. So I went to the library, and I had the dates that they all passed away. And so that part was pretty easy because I just gave it to the research lady at the desk and told her that I was looking for the Newport Daily Independent for these dates.
But what are you looking for in the newspaper that's important, and why is it important to people who are researching?
I was specifically looking for newspaper obituaries, and the newspaper obituary would have when a person dies, their spouse's name if they're married. It would have their children's name if they had children. Sometimes it has their church information because that's usually where the funeral is. It would have the funeral home because that's usually where they would go and view the body before the funeral. It would have where the cemetery they were buried in. It would have all that type of information where then I could go and get more information from those different sources.
So is you looking for information to help you along your journey, find other information, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you may find you already know all the information about the person who has passed away potentially.
In this case, right, I did.
But you may find information about a brother or a sister or
Correct.
a parent or whatever it is
where they
you can
worked.
find in that obituary.
Right.
Or at least it'll help lead you to a place to
or person
to call, email,
that would
write,
have more
whatever.
information.
Yeah,
Right.
cool.
So that was my first experience. It was a very good experience. Again, I found all the information that I wanted that day. And actually, while I was there, I also found my parents' wedding announcement in the newspaper. I found our wedding announcement in the newspaper. So I was able to find everything, and that gave me confidence to know that newspapers were definitely something that I needed to utilize more in my research.
Yeah, is that the only instance when you use newspapers?
No, it's not. I went to a conference in 2015 and I learned about online newspapers. And that was when I realized that I didn't necessarily have to go be physically in the library to look at newspapers. Because before that, I thought all newspapers were in libraries or research centers on microfilm. And I thought that you just had to go to the library. But you can go online to newspapers.com, which is a subscription. You have to pay for it. Or Genealogy Bank, that's also a subscription you have to pay for. And the Library of Congress also has historical newspapers on their website. And the Library of Congress is actually free. So I was able to find an old newspaper from the 40s and 50s, the Arkansas State Press, which was an African American newspaper in Arkansas. And back then, the news was about the community. There wasn't any national news. There wasn't any world news in these newspapers. It was literally about what was happening in the community. Who got married, who had a baby, who died, who was visiting the town, who was traveling out of town. Anything that was going on with the people in the town, that's what the newspapers covered back then. And so I was able to find information about my grandfather Booker's family that were visiting in Newport in the 50s that I had no idea that he even had contact with his family at this point. So that gave me names to be able to research his sister, his aunt, and things like that.
Yeah, so having, access to newspapers online is really a big deal nowadays because people can get instant access to the information
Right.
a lot quicker, right?
Right.
It used to be where you had to go to the library and pull up newspapers on microfilm or microfiche or
Right.
go look through an
A big
old,
book that's bound in
yeah.
newspapers. We have those in Newport as well.
So even though newspapers aren't as popular anymore, the physical copy of the newspaper, they're still popular. They're just ingested in a
A
different
different
way.
way, right.
And so I would imagine that people who are doing research they're going to have to be comfortable with going online and looking at newspapers
Yes. And
because that's where they are now.
right. Then there are a lot of newspapers online, but then there are still times where you have to go to the library. But the online newspapers, and you have to remember that they are scanned in. And so some of these newspapers are really old. They were not in great condition when they were scanned. So a lot of them are hard to read. So you do have to keep that in mind. But, I mean, it is what it is. You can't, make the newspaper, an old newspaper, better quality.
Yeah, you just have to hope that the company that scanned them for digital use did a good job at it because that's what it comes down to is the quality of the scan because the
Well, you have to
when you
remember,
get old newspapers they tend to yellow and
crease.
yeah, and so I understand that, but it's still up to the company to offer good scans of those newspapers.
And you have to remember that a lot of these were scanned in the 70s and 80s, not recently. So the equipment was different back then. So you get what you get when you get it. And sometimes when you go to the library, the microfilm or the actual bound book is not any better. It's just old newspaper. You can't guarantee that it's all going to be great.
I would think that going online and looking at newspapers is a good idea for people who are doing research
Yes.
and everything. But when you find something, what's the best way to use that information? Should you print it out? Should you try to find a original copy? I mean, what do you do with the information when you find it?
I am a big paper person, and I should not be in this day and age, but I am. So if I'm at the library, it depends on the microfilm machine that I'm using. Some of them now are actually hooked up to current computers where you can put in your USB drive and save a copy. But then there are other times, like at the National Archives, where they're the original microfilm machines and you have to print a copy if you want a copy. And then I can come home and scan it to my computer if I wanted to. If you're using one of the genealogy newspaper subscriptions like newspapers.com, you can download those and save them to your computer.
And you said those are
They are. They both,
subscription based.
yes.
If I can talk.
Yes, they are. And they both have a free trial. I think it's like 14 days where you sign up and you get the first 14 days free. And that's what I did originally. I did the first 14 days free for each one of them. And then I canceled my subscription because at that time, I didn't want to pay for it because they're over $20 a piece a month.
Yeah.
And if you're not actively looking for newspapers every day, that was money that I could put somewhere else.
Yeah, and if they're still doing a promotion like that with a free trial, sign up for that sucker and just spend 2 weeks.
That's
just
what I did.
Getting as much information as you possibly can, and then canceling your subscription. I mean, I'm sure people do it all the time.
Yeah, you can. And then you can also get it just for 1 month. You don't have to get it to where it's drawn out every month or whatever.
So you can do it monthly. You can just cancel it after
yeah,
that
if you
month.
think you're going to need a whole month of research in newspapers, then you can just get it for that month, and then you don't have to worry about canceling it. You just pay for that one time.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about access to different publications? So you talked about black newspapers. We know black newspapers are usually in smaller quantity. Smaller newspapers aren't readily available like, daily newspapers,
Right.
general market. Did you have a hard time finding those newspapers, or do you know if those types of newspapers are available?
They are available. I did not have a hard time finding it. Once I knew that I was looking for the Arkansas State Press, I knew I could find it in one of two places for sure. I knew I could go to the state archives because they have all the newspapers from around the state from the 1860s into the present on microfilm. And I live close to the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, and they have a special collections, and they too have almost all of the newspapers from around the state as well on microfilm. So if you live close to a state archive, I would suggest going there. I would suggest going to a college library. And if all else failed, because the Arkansas State Press that I got it through interlibrary loan from Little Rock, the Little Rock Library, Public Library. So don't be afraid to go to your local library and just ask the question, do you have interlibrary loan? Can you get them from this library? This is what I'm looking for. And then you can go to that library and see if it's there.
Yeah, I would bet that most libraries have that,
Right.
Where you can check something out from another library, even if it's not in your local region.
Right. Because I didn't know I could do that in Newport.
Can you do that across states, or is it just interstate?
I have, but I've only done it in Missouri and Texas, and I know those are border states. I don't know if that makes a difference. When I emailed the Saginaw, Michigan Public Library, I did inquire about interlibrary loan, and they said they don't do it out of state, period, not even to border states. But since they don't do that, they have people on staff that actually will go through the newspaper for you if you have the date or a date range, and then they will scan it and email it to you.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, you don't want to lose your stuff,
Right.
If you're the library, you don't want your stuff leaving your building, let alone leave the state.
Correct. I get it.
So that makes sense.
But it never hurts to
Yeah,
ask.
so if you have an option of doing interlibrary loan, even if it's just within the state, it may help you in your research. And then don't forget to maybe you have family members in other states that they can go to the library for you
Right.
and get what you need, and you handle it that way. So there are ways that you can get the information
Right.
and the things that you need. So
Because in this day and age, there are very few people that actually live in the community that they're researching. I don't actually live in Newport. I'm very lucky that I still live in the state, and my father still lives in Newport, so I'm in Newport quite a bit. But there are people who don't live in the state that need or are looking for newspapers, and that is a good way to try to get them is through interlibrary loan or going to the regional offices of the National Archives. There are 8. I don't remember them all off the top of my head, but like Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, they're all in the same region. So, and that regional office is in Texas, in Dallas. So people who live in Texas that may visit Dallas that have, family from Mississippi would be able to go to that regional office and look for Mississippi records, being newspapers, census records, tax records, and things like that.
and the thing is you may find more than just the obituary that you're looking for.
Right.
So I think the picture of your grandfather in the singing group that you didn't know. You didn't know he was in a singing group,
not.
but you found
I did.
that information out. So even though it wasn't, a an obituary,
Correct.
or it didn't really, quote unquote, help you in your
It was a good
journey,
find.
it was a good find because
Right.
you learned more about. Sometimes you get caught up in just trying to place a name
Name and dates.
or dates and things like that, and not try to figure out who they were,
Yeah.
because a lot of times people aren't alive anymore that knew these people,
Right.
and so you have to rely on things like newspaper articles and church records
Right.
and things like that. You find out about grandfather being a part of a singing group,
To tell the story.
and you can't sing, so it
that's
didn't pass down to you.
Actually, I sing
So,
very well.
No, you don't.
I have one of those church voices that's really good
When
in the
you with
congregation.
everybody else, yeah, except for the person who's standing next to you. So,
Whatever.
so what would be some tips for the person who is either new to genealogy and researching, or people who haven't started using newspapers yet? What would you tell them, to do?
My first thing I would do is if you have names and dates already, I would definitely get a free trial to newspapers.com or Genealogy Bank or some type of newspaper subscription site like that. Because the good thing about those is you can put in a name and a date and it'll come up. And you can search by state. You can search just by date and things like that. You can also put in, because I put in my home church, St. Paul AME Church, Newport, Arkansas, and a date range. And I was able to find articles about my grandparents doing stuff in the church and things like that. So that's something very convenient that you can do, and you're able to find a lot. Unlike when you go on microfilm, you have to know what you're looking for. You have to know the date of the newspaper and at least the name of the article, or some kind of heading that you're looking for. But you don't have to do that with the newspaper subscription sites. So that would be something that would be pretty easy to utilize, and it's user-friendly because, like I said, you can just put in a name and a date, or a city and a date, or a church, or whatever it is that you're looking for, and you'll be able to find out some additional information.
Are there any other websites or services that people can use to research newspapers. I know you mentioned newspapers.com, and you mentioned another one.
Genealogybank.com.
Yeah. So are there any others than those? And
There are, but I don't know any off the top of my head.
you haven't used those?
I know that you can get some newspapers on Ancestry. They have started digitizing newspapers. So you can get some there, but of course you do have to pay for that as well. But no, I can't think of any because those are the three. The Library of Congress is free. Genealogy Bank and newspapers.com are the three main ones that I use.
What would you say has been your best find in newspapers so far?
I would have to say I found my 3 times great-grandfather's emancipation papers, his
That's
freedom
right.
papers.
I forgot about that.
In the Arkansas True Democrat in 1863.
Yeah, I remember that. I forgot.
And I found the information from a family member that had information about our family, and he was like the first person that they knew about Robert Hatchett. And all they had was that it was in the newspaper. And I had that information for about 6 months trying to figure out how I can find it out and see where is this. And then it dawned on me, it has the newspaper and the date. I can just go to the library and find this newspaper. And so I went online to the University of Arkansas library website and put in Arkansas True Democrat with the date, the year, and they had it on microfilm. So I went up there one Saturday and looked through it.
Which finding that in turn helped you receive membership into the Sons and Daughters of the U.S. Middle Passage, because you wouldn't have been able to join without him.
No, I would not have.
Because you have to have found and
link,
prove that you are in fact a descendant of an enslaved person.
Correct.
Right?
And I had to prove that he was actually enslaved.
Yeah.
So
that proved it.
Right.
Because it said that he was being emancipated.
Correct.
From
the Powell plantation.
The owner, right?
Right.
From his owner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was in a newspaper. But back then, that's how the owners proved that they had freed their slaves. They announced it in the newspaper, and then the slaves had to actually carry their papers on them if they were ever questioned.
Which is a blessing because, people didn't tell the names of their slaves in too many places, right?
Correct.
I mean, you look at census records and things, you would just see male, female, or
just that's it in their age.
Or in their age, right? And so sometimes you have to, look through and try to guess based on age, based on, sex, based on whatever.
When I think he might have been born, and so in 1860 he would have been 15. So one of these 3 men could have been him. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't know for sure. Know.
But in the newspaper, because they wanted to prove that they did emancipate, their slaves, they put their names in too.
And it was Pickett, not Powell. Sorry. That's another side of my family. The Pickett plantation.
But that's something that you wouldn't find if you didn't put a name into, the search field. And it comes up with more than just an obituary. Right,
because that would be the only way that we knew who owned our family.
Which led to other conversations with a lady who wrote a book about them or something, or I don't know. I don't remember. You might have to remind me exactly.
I don't remember
it was a while ago.
She wrote the book. W.H. Pickett owned my 3 times great-grandfather, and his brother A.C. Pickett is who the lady wrote the book about, because he was part of the American Spanish War. and that's who she was researching. And so I contacted her to see if she had any knowledge or knew where I could find any of their family's papers
Right. That's right.
to try to get further back from Robert to see if I could find Robert's mother.
Yeah. So that's cool because a lot of people don't find out. I mean, they know that their family is, were slaves,
Yeah.
but they don't know like who owned. And it's sad.
Right.
It's a terrible, situation, right? But it's real life.
That's our
It's exactly what
experience.
happened. It's our history, and knowing that information just, I would imagine just kind of fills a larger gap than just having a name and a date of
Right.
birth, date of death, and that's it.
It does. It means something. I mean, to see that in the newspaper from 1863 with his name on it, that means a lot. It shows me the things that, my family may have gone through, had to endure, for me to be able to sit here and talk to you about genealogy research today. So, yeah, it helped, not only bridge the gap, but it gave me a sense of pride.
Yeah.
I mean, I know where I'm from. I know what he had to go through.
Yeah, and it came from a newspaper,
Correct.
right?
Yes, it
And
did. It all
so-
started with a newspaper article.
And you can easily just discount newspapers, in 2018
Yes.
because you just don't see newspapers around anymore. But don't discount newspapers. You can find a lot of information about, your family, about,
Your town.
whatever you're looking for. You can find it in the newspaper. And so I would, encourage people to use newspapers. What advice would you give someone who may be looking through newspapers and they just hit a brick wall and not finding anything?
I would say if you have the time, take a break, because I have definitely looked at newspapers for hours upon hours, even when I know the actual date that I'm looking for and I can't find it. Take a break, relax, go for a walk, or, just stretch your legs, give your eyes a rest, and then come back to it. And it's like looking at it with fresh eyes. So don't give up. Always go back and, look at newspaper, especially if you know the information is there. You just have to find it.
Yeah, I would recommend that you talk to the workers inside the library because they may be able to help, especially if you're in the town that you're researching.
Right.
A lot of those people who work in a library have lived there their whole lives, and some libraries have genealogy departments,
Right.
and they specialize in that. And having another person, look at it or give you tips, or they may even know
information.
somebody.
Right.
Don't be afraid. Don't be so frustrated and that you're afraid to ask somebody there to help you, because that's what the library
That's what they're there
is.
for.
They are a resource of
Right.
information, and even if they don't have a genealogy department, they may know somebody or somewhere to go to help you.
Right. Another thing I would suggest is to contact that local historical society. Most cities or counties have a local historical society, and their main purpose is to preserve the history of that city or that county. And most of the time, that is newspapers, because if you think about it, up until probably 30 years ago, most of the information that was, communicated with was in newspapers. So a lot of the historical societies have either helped scan in newspapers on microfilm. They've helped newspaper companies bind the books. They wouldn't have a lot of knowledge on where you can find the newspapers, if they've been even digitized, and if they have, what company owns those rights to to the digital copies. So the local historical society would be a wealth of knowledge, I believe. I know the one in Jackson County was to me.
Okay, so do you have any other information or tips or advice for people before we end the episode?
No, just my general advice. Keep researching. If you know dates and names, then you can find out the information, what I like to call research in the dash, which would be the story between birth and death. Just keep at it, keep researching. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for questions.
So we hope this information provided today helps you in some sort of way. Hopefully it gives you some motivation or some encouragement or just some new information to help you lead you in your journey through your family tree and the research that you're doing. And if you're listening and you haven't started it but want to, I hope this is a good place for you to start. So just one announcement. Trisha and I decided to attend the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society Conference. That's a mouthful. I think I'll just say AAHGS.
I think they call it AUGS.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to that conference in October in Philadelphia, or it's right outside Philadelphia. And so we'll be going to that conference, and we're hoping to do a podcast while we're there. So I'm working on trying to figure out, the traveling part of doing a mobile podcast.
The logistics.
So making sure that we can do that. So we're looking to do some interviews while we're there. So if you're going to be there and you're interested in being a part of our podcast, reach out to us and let us know. You can email journeythroughthegenerations@gmail.com, and Trisha and I will contact you back and see if there's something that we can do together. And we're looking just to meet, new people and
work on my networking.
Yeah, do some networking and do a podcast while we're there. So that's coming up. And just want to remind you too is don't forget to follow us on social media. We're on Twitter right now. It's the only social media place we are right now. The handle Twitter name is Gen Journey Blog. Also, Trisha is writing a blog. It's been a while. I think you're due for a blog post,
I'm
right?
well overdue.
If you'd like to read Trisha's blog post, go and subscribe to her blog at journeythroughthegenerations.com. You can subscribe and you'll get notification every time she posts a blog. She also has been doing that for well over a year now. And so there's a lot of posts there about varying pieces of information and things.
There's 3 about newspapers.
Yeah, so go back and read some of the older blog posts that she has on there. And then, of course, the podcast. Tell a friend, tell someone you know who's into genealogy or maybe thinking about it to listen to our podcast. Certainly subscribe to our podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcast and also on Google Play. And we try to do a post or an episode
about every month,
once a month. And so we'll be back at the end of August, early September-ish. Try to do it the first week of the month. There's some traveling that's going to be involved around there, but we'll try to get it done around that. And anything else? Did I forget anything? I think that's it, right?
No, I think that's all.
Yep. So we really appreciate you taking the time to listen. Tell a friend about us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks so much. Don't forget, love the journey.
All right. Bye.